Devin Graves coming to you once again from Studio D with the first video in a series of home recording crash course videos that I call Old School Home Recording for the Modern Age. My intention of these videos is to try and bring back the value to music and try to find where the value has been lost. And in my estimation, the less human music has become, the less value it has held. First, it starts with quantizing everything to the grid. Sounds perfect, but it loses the humanity. Never replaced an old Led Zeppelin album with an album recorded that is quantized. Next would be fake drums, programmed drums. Now, this is great for demos, but for an album, there's nothing like the performance of a real drummer, preferably with the sounds of a real drum set. Thirdly, copy and pasting. It is so common, even in the biggest metal bands nowadays, to copy and paste their choruses. They play the verse once, then they copy and paste it for every time the verse happens musically. The chorus comes, they copy and paste. They copy and paste the wall of vocals they make to where it's all repeated. And this again is losing the humanity. Back in the day of analog recording, we had to sing that chorus every time. And this gave us the opportunity to sing it a little bit different, to play it a little bit different each time it came around. Brian May once said that if you are not doing something new in your second chorus and in your third chorus and in your second verse and in your third verse, if you're not taking it to a new place, you're doing your audience a disservice. And I completely agree. If the same performance is just simply repeated, the humanity is gone. If it's played every time, and you don't have to play it all the way through the song from beginning to end. If you need to punch in on your verses, punch in on your verses, but punch in on each verse and use that as an opportunity to add a little something different to the guitar line. Do a different drum fill, do a different bass fill. Same goes for the chorus. Sing it a little different, sing it a little more emotionally, sing it louder, sing it whatever it takes, but take it to a new place. Third, or fourth, is auto-tune. Now, when auto-tune is used stylistically, that's one thing, but when it's used as a replacement for a good vocal performance, that just washes the humanity out. It's much better to search for that perfect vocal performance. Work for it. Record it again and again until you capture it. If the pitch is a little off, then sing the pitch on next time. Look, you're recording at home. You're not on the clock. It's not costing you any more money to try again. And finally, digital streaming. Okay, it's fine to digital stream your music. That's a great way to get out there and to perhaps be discovered or found by new listeners. But unless your music resides in a physical space, a CD or preferably vinyl, your music will be perceived as not having value. So there's going to be some financial outlay to give the legitimacy of your music, to have it reside somewhere physically. And speaking of financial outlay, this video is really a basic overview of everything you're going to need to start a home studio. Now, there's other videos out there that are just as good, but for the sake of having this series be complete, I really need to start at the beginning. Each of these topics I'm going to expand upon later, either with videos to come in the series or with videos that already exist that I will put in the link below. For this video series, I'm going to try to be posting twice a week. So if you don't want to miss any of these videos, please subscribe. It would really help the channel out. Also, be sure to like this video if you like the series. Leave a comment below if you have anything to say, if you have any suggestions or any experiences you want to share, or, very importantly, any questions, because I do read the comments as much as I can, and I do answer the questions to the best of my ability. The first thing you're going to need is a studio space, which means an acoustically treated room with a good pair of studio monitors. Now, acoustic treatment is a must, and this is the first thing you should start with, because everything that follows is going to be an uphill battle if you don't start with the acoustic treatment first. That's not only for mixing, but just as important for recording. So I'll make a video that is specifically how to do the acoustic treatment. And in the meantime, you could also check out a video I already made called Nothing Else Matters Much, What Really Matters in Home Recording. That video will be linked below. So you need to start with a basic set of acoustic treatment, which basically means 4-inch thick compressed fiberglass like Owens Corning 703, from ceiling to floor in every corner, cutting out the corners. And then you'll want the same Corning 703 at the points of first reflection, to the sides of the speakers, between the speaker and your listening position, on the left, on the right, and on the ceiling. Also behind the speakers and also on the back wall. Again, a video will come out dealing with this more specifically, but that's the general need. You can make these traps yourself. You can make these acoustic panels yourself by buying Owens Corning 703 or something similar. It's a very rigid compressed fiberglass material. If you can't find the 4-inch thick version, double up on the 2-inch thick, but go 4 inches. Don't mess around, just go with 4 inches. You're going to be much better off. Then you'll need a decent pair of monitor speakers. Doesn't have to be the most expensive speakers in the world, but generally speaking, the more you spend on these monitors, the better off you're going to be. You can never make a big mistake by spending a lot of money on monitors. You can make a mistake by having monitors that are too big for your room, but believe me, the higher you spend on your monitors, the better off you're going to be. Having said that, you can get a pair of excellent studio monitors for $500, 500 euros from Kali Audio, and there are other brands out there as well. So just keep your eyes open and find something good, but make sure they're a studio monitor, not a hi-fi home speaker. You'll also need a set of closed back earphones, and those are going to be for tracking. You want the closed back type so that they don't leak so much into the microphone. If you're singing and you're this close to your microphone and you have earphones that are making noise, your mic will pick that up and it will really get in the way. Especially when you add high frequencies or when you add distortion to your voice, it's going to really exacerbate that bleed. So closed back earphones for tracking, studio monitors for monitoring your mix. Then you're going to need some sort of audio interface. And this is generally the hub of the recording studio. It's going to determine how many microphones you can record simultaneously, how many inputs you have, how many mic preamps you have, how many line inputs you have. It's also going to determine more or less the general sound quality limitations of your system. Now, any system out there, any interface out there, you don't have to question whether it's going to be good enough. Today, every interface, the digital analog quality is just as good, if not way better than the highest end stuff that was available 20 years ago. So don't worry so much about quality, although the mic preamps can differ. They don't differ in any way that's going to be detrimental for the most part. But this is the device that you will plug your microphones into, and then via USB or Thunderbolt, this will plug into your computer, and then the audio gets converted from analog from the microphones into digital to the computer, and then from the computer, from digital back to analog to the speaker outputs. So your microphones connect to this. Your guitars can plug straight into this if you're doing line-in guitar recording or keyboards or bass or what have you. And then your monitor speakers plug into here. You have a volume control for your monitor speakers. You also have at least one headphone output with a control for your headphone volume. If you're doing anything serious and if you're really planning on recording a band, recording more than just voice and a guitar, I recommend a 4-channel interface that has not only 4 channels, but also has ADAT expansion inputs on the back. So you can expand when you want to have more microphones for your drum set. If you want to mic 10, 12 microphones on a drum kit, you will need a 4-channel audio interface plus an additional 8 channels of ADAT mic pre's that go into that. My favorite interface in this is the Audient ID44. Another thing you'll want to check for is inserts on the mic input channels so that somehow you can intervene with your signal, usually with a compressor. The mic goes into the interface, and normally the interface just goes straight into the computer, and so there's no way you can alter that signal. But if your interface has inserts on the back, like the ID44 has inserts on channels 1 and 2, balanced inserts, that allows you to put a compressor after the mic preamp, but before the analog to digital conversion. Or you can also add an EQ or any chain of signals processors that you want into that insert between the mic preamp and the input of the audio to the computer. That way, recording a compressed signal into the computer will give you the best headroom, the best levels that you can get. Not overly dynamic, not clipping sometimes, and too quiet others. So that's what a compressor's for. And again, there will be a video specifically on that subject later in the series. Then you're going to need a computer and a DAW, digital audio workstation, which is the software used to record and produce your music. I would recommend selecting your DAW first. The DAW of choice, there's Studio One, there's Logic Pro, there's Cubase, Reaper, there's Pro Tools. When it comes to a small system, I would avoid Pro Tools. Even though I'm a Pro Tools guy, I'm recording this audio that I'm speaking onto a Mac M1 with Pro Tools, and I use Pro Tools HD for all my audio production, but I would only recommend Pro Tools if you're using an HD or HDX system, and I will talk about that, specifically why on a later version. Otherwise, I would avoid Pro Tools altogether because I think it is the worst business model. I love Pro Tools, but I do not love Avid. You can do just as good, if not better, with Logic Pro, with Cubase, with Reaper, and the one I would probably pick is Studio One from PreSonus. You can look into that yourself, but I would choose the DAW first so that you know what your system requirements are going to be, and then you can choose your computer appropriately. Having said that, PC or Mac, of course, they all work. Of course, one is just as good as the other. But if you're just learning, this is going to be a struggle enough. So I would recommend finding a Mac, a MacBook Pro, a Mac Mini. You can even find one very inexpensive that is refurbished, that's only a few years old, for just a few €100 or dollars. And the reason I recommend the Mac isn't because the Mac is better. It's just because it's going to be easier. And when you're just learning, you have enough to worry about: learning about mic position, learning about mixing decisions, learning about room treatment and monitor placement, and all these experiments you're going to be doing just with recording alone. And with a Windows-based system, you might be further complicated with driver errors, driver incompatibilities, and system settings that you're going to have to go into and figure out in your system preferences and things, shutting things off. The reason why PCs are so complicated for audio is because PCs are designed to work with everything. They're great for gaming, they're great for emails, they're great for word processing, and all of this sort of stuff. And that's the whole point, that they work with everything so that optimal settings might vary from application to application. And when it comes to music, every time you're adding some piece of music gear, an audio interface, a MIDI interface, any of these things that you add into the computer via hardware or via software could cause complications, could cause failures that you don't know about, and then you have to learn how to go into your system and make the appropriate settings. These settings can be made and it's going to work, but this is just going to be an additional struggle that using a Mac will free you from. Then you're going to need a mixing desk of some sort, some place that you can sit at and hear and work, a producer's desk of some sort. It can have rack spaces for outboard gear that we'll talk about later. It could have just a space for maybe a MIDI controller that we're about to get to, but you're going to need some sort of mixing desk to sit at. And speaking of sitting, this is often overlooked, but you're going to not only need a comfortable chair, but you're going to need a chair that is silent. The one I'm sitting in, this is a conductor's chair. This costs about 400 euros. There probably are better, more comfortable chairs, maybe that cost more. But I've spent many, many, many years with a chair that will make a squeak or a creak every time you lean forward or lean back or rotate. And sometimes if you have a vocalist near you and then you go to hit stop, you get a creak, sometimes in the middle of their last word, or sometimes just too close to the ending of what they're singing to edit cleanly, or you just accidentally move while they're performing, or you're playing your own acoustic guitar and your chair creaks as you move. That is a big problem. So check the chair for its ability to remain silent as you move in it. That's a big, big, big necessity that I don't want you to find out the hard way. Then, of course, you're going to need microphones, unless you're just doing EDM, which is really counter to my whole point of this video series. This video series is about making rock music. It doesn't matter if it's country or blues or even jazz, whatever. I'm talking about recording acoustic instruments, recording amplifiers, using microphones, human performances. That's what this series is about. So if you're doing EDM, maybe this series can serve you anyway, but that is not the intention of this series. That's not the speciality of this series. So if you get yourself a 4-channel audio interface, I would recommend beginning with at least, if you can, 3 microphones. First, you want a microphone for your vocals. If you're a loud, aggressive singer, you can use one like this Shure SM7B that is excellent for loud, aggressive singers because it kind of smooths off all of the harshness, and it doesn't pick up such a hi-fi range of sounds where all the spit is going to be picked up and amplified. So it's going to smooth that out and it's going to sound better for that kind of singer. But if you're more of a character vocalist or if you have a more subtle sound, I'd recommend some type of large diaphragm condenser mic. This particular one is a Telefunken Copperhead CU29, I believe. This is the single polar pattern version. This microphone costs about $16.99. At least that's what I paid for it a few years ago. And this punches way above its weight class. This is just as good as any mic that costs 5 or 10 times the money. Fantastic mic. Tube microphone, transformer, old world design, phenomenal mic at an excellent price. But you can get one that's a lot cheaper. There are ones from companies like, one of my favorite companies is SE Audio. They make excellent microphones, large diaphragms, small diaphragms that we'll get to, even ribbon mics at a really affordable price, and they're very, very well made. There's also Roswell microphones that are a little bit pricier than the SEs, or well, most of them, but Roswell microphones are excellent, excellent. The Colaris and the Delphi is one that are as good as any high-end large diaphragm condensers as you'll find, and those are more around the $1,000 to $1,500 range. You can get large diaphragm condenser mics for a couple $100, but I would recommend at least spending $300 or more so that you don't end up with the anomalies that the cheaper ones have, where the high frequencies get really harsh right when you start to add high-end EQ to the mix. So careful about that. So large diaphragm condenser mic or a large diaphragm dynamic mic for vocals. And then a pair of small diaphragm condenser mics. These are from the company SE. And small diaphragm condenser mics, similar to studio monitors, the more you spend, the better you're going to get. It's not the same with large diaphragm mics. You could spend $10,000 on a mic that doesn't sound good on your voice and spend $300 on one that sounds excellent for your voice. So that is subject to your voice and your taste. But when it comes to small diaphragm condenser mics, what we want is accuracy. And the more you spend, the more accurate you're going to get. You can check out my video on microphones demystified, and you will see a little more into the science of these microphones. These are from Schoeps. These microphones are about as good as it gets for a small diaphragm condenser mic. And they're phenomenal for acoustic guitars, drum overheads, any instruments, hand percussion, any stringed instruments, anything where you want accuracy. A small diaphragm condenser mic means accuracy. And the better mic you get, the more accurate you're going to get. Having said that, these SE mics are by far the best in their price class. These cost between $300 and $500 euros, $399, $599 for a hand-matched stereo set. These are hand-assembled. These microphones are fantastic. They are excellent. And I even did I listened to a mic shootout with tens of mics, scores of mics, including Neumann's, including the classic usual suspects like the Shure SM81s, which I have, the AKGs, and all these classic microphones. And these SEs, well, the Schoeps sounded the best. This was on acoustic guitar. The Schoeps definitely sounded the best, but the SEs sounded nearly identical. Nearly identical, and all the other microphones I would not have said the same. So these have a low frequency roll off at 2 different points. They have a pad at 2 different points, I think -10 and -20 dB. And I believe you can even get different diaphragms, different capsules. These are cardioid capsules, and then you can get omni capsules. I'll talk more about that in a future video. There's more to an omnidirectional mic than just the directionality. We'll talk about that another time. But if you have a good large diaphragm condenser and an excellent pair of small diaphragm condensers, you can record just about anything. You want a pair of small diaphragms so you can record these in stereo. Of course, you can do mono if you want, but you can record in stereo, get a matched stereo pair, and you will be off to the races. If you want a fourth mic and you use a large diaphragm condenser, I would get either an SMB, Shure SMB, a Shure SM57 dynamic mic, or maybe even a kick drum mic. And I'll talk about that strategy, a 4-microphone strategy for recording drums. Or you can, of course, expand into the 8-channel expansion and record, all the toms, discreetly and so forth. But there are ways, depending on your music style, that 4 mics on the drums could be all you need. Now, this is often overlooked, but you're also going to need instruments. In my school of recording, old school recording in the modern age, you're going to need actual instruments and actual amplifiers. Guitar, you need a good guitar. It doesn't have to be expensive, it just has to play well It has to stay in tune, and it has to sound good. You might want an acoustic guitar if that's in your style. You'll definitely want a bass guitar. And then you need at least a guitar amp. Whether it's a tube amp or a solid state amp is a stylistic thing. Just keep in mind that if you're using a tube amp, a big amp is not necessary in a small room. You can get away with a small combo amp. Maybe make sure it has speaker outs so you can buy a cabinet, because if you want these metal tones, you'll want a 12-inch, like a 2x12 or a 4x12 speaker cabinet. The choice of speakers is critical. But this is the reason. If you can use amp sims, you can. But using amp sims is going to be a canned sound that's going to have what I call a digital ceiling. You're going to only be able to take it so far, and you're going to only be able to get so close to your vision. And maybe if you're doing metal sounds, sometimes amp sims are the safer bet because it's easier to get good, distorted, overdriven metal tones from an amp sim than it is from an amp. But if you're more of a character guitar player, edge of distortion, clean channel guitars, a good tube amp or a good solid state amp, that's a stylistic choice. And we'll make a video dedicated to that subject. But by having your own amp is going to give you an endless palette of possibilities to get your own signature sound. It's going to give you the ability to educate yourself on how to get a good sound. And it's going to give you the ability to completely, really endlessly modify that sound. It's not the same as choosing a mic emulation in a amp sim and then choosing a mic position. No. If you actually pick a mic and you actually move it on the speaker, you're going to get far more minute differences than you would from these emulations. Also, the distance of the mic, the type of mic, all these things are open to experimentation. A lot of recordings of Led Zeppelin, they included mics at the back of the amp. They used a lot of combo amps, and putting a microphone behind the combo gave you this massive bass boost that you could blend in with the front mic. So the ability to experiment with mics and mic placement and amp settings and speaker selections and guitars, this is going to give you an endless palette. In fact, Andy Johns said that you don't get your sound at the mixer. The mixer is not the sound. And despite what they try to sell you with SSL and Neve and all this stuff, you don't get the sound at the mixer. You get the sound in the recording room. If the amp isn't working for the sound, then change the amp. Don't change the EQ on the board. Get a different amp. Get the right speaker, get the right mic, get the right mic placement. All of that experimentation is where you get your sound. And on the same subject, real drums. Look, when you're making a song, when you're patterning out a song, and we will get into this, it's excellent to start with programmed drums. This is going to give you a good meter, a good tempo map to play to, and if the drums are on the grid, you can play to those drums and you're going to be tight. And when you have some sort of digital drums, there are some sort of, drum samples there, that frequency spectrum is kind of consumed in the mix. So it's going to educate you on what's going to be a good guitar sound, a good bass sound that is going to fit in that mix. So you can make your amp setting adjustments and your mic setting adjustments according to the digital drums, and then play to said digital drums, get a good tight performance, and then in the end replace those hopefully with real drums. And I will give you excellent instructions in a later video on how to do that. But keep in mind, a real set of drums played by a real drummer is going to be the difference between a real record, a real album, and something robotic, something less than human. And again, this is my aim with this video series, to bring the humanity back into rock. Now, we've talked about microphones, But what gets often overlooked and not budgeted for is mic stands. So for every microphone you have, you're going to need a good mic stand. And just about any mic stand will do, except if you lay out a bunch of money for a large diaphragm condenser mic. These things are heavy and they're delicate, so don't cheap out on the stand. Get a good mic stand. Prepare to spend $200, $400 or euros for a great mic stand. I invested in the Mic King 1100 because I have a Neumann U67 microphone, and if that thing falls over, oh, what a tragedy, what a tragedy. So the Mic King 1100 is a big, sturdy boom stand that isn't going anywhere. There are other options available as well, but if you have an expensive vocal mic, get a good, sturdy, pricey stand and preserve it. Also budget for mic cables. Of course, for every microphone, you need a mic cable. Be sure it's going to be a length that is going to suffice, but not longer, not much longer anyway, because the mic signal is very faint. So the shorter the cable you can get away with, the better, but don't obsess over it. And also don't obsess over the quality of a mic cable. Don't get the silver mic cables or even the Mogami. I mean, you can if it makes you feel better. They're certainly not going to hurt you. But just about any mic cable, as long as it's a good quality cable, is going to be just fine. Then another thing you might want to consider is if you're doing any virtual instruments, even though we're playing real guitars, if we don't have a real piano or a real orchestra, we can put in the background, of course, these virtual instruments, in which case you will need some sort of MIDI controller so you can actually play these instruments. So that's basically it. With that, you can be off and running and causing a lot of damage in the world of recording, so to speak. And then if you want a path for growth, you can consider getting some high-end mic preamps or channel strips, compressors, EQs to go into those inserts, or to completely bypass the preamp on your interface with something like a Neve mic preamp, Focusrite ISA mic preamps, API preamps, or any of the clones, the Warm Audio, in any of those clones. They're going to be a step up, and I will also dedicate a video specifically to that. So that is a path for expansion. Another path for expansion is a DAW controller, something to give you faders and control over your soft synth parameters and your mix parameters and your plugins. You can see my video on the C24, which is kind of a extinct product, but you can buy used. It's, in my opinion, by far the best controller out there, but it is huge. However, nowadays there are controllers made by SSL, Icon, and there are plenty you can look at to see these controllers, but they're actually more than just a big mouse, especially if you're recording yourself, because if you're recording yourself and you only have the computer and you're using the mouse to click the record button, that's a bit cumbersome, especially, it doesn't matter if you're playing guitar or singing, that's a bit cumbersome. I've been free of that most of my digital recording career. Before that, I was doing it with a tape recorder, having a remote control with the record and stop button. But on my controller here, I've got record, I've got stop, and being able to just press those buttons is a lot easier, or arm the track for recording by pressing a button. Move the fader to adjust the volume quickly is so much better than having to scrunch down and get the mouse and grab any of these parameters while you're tracking. Any DAW controller that has a transport function is going to be a godsend. And finally, you can just expand that 4-channel interface via ADAT with an 8-channel mic preamp so you can record your drums, or 2 8-channel mic preamps if you want to record a whole band live off the floor, which is another way to get back to old school methods and something we'll be talking about. So I hope that starts you off, and I hope you look forward to the next installment of this, where we're going to get specifically into acoustic treatment and speaker placement. So until then,